Chance is one of the 12 characters in Forsaken, and quite frankly, he's one of my favorites. He's definitely one of the goofier ones, and I love that about him. I was thinking about my content in general, and I was thinking about Forsaken because I've been primarily making quite a few shorts about it, and I realized I need to just improve my content. So I thought I'd give a guide on one of my favorite characters who I often see people play either really well or really horribly. And quite frankly, it doesn't need to be that way. Chance is not very complicated, and there's not really any complicated tech towards him. You just need to know when's the best time to use his abilities, like most. But Chance is a bit more risky than others, well, hence the name, Chance. So, I think I'm going to go over them. Skip to the timestamp on screen if you know what his abilities do. However, if you want to learn a bit more about the abilities, then this next section will just run through all 4 of them. But if you already know, I recommend just skipping to the more how to play section. So, without further ado, let's begin! Let's start with his first ability, Coin Flip. Coin Flip is exactly what it says. Chance will flip a coin, where it will land on either heads or tails. If it lands on heads, Chance will get 1 charge. If it lands on tails, Chance will be given weakness 1 for 15 seconds. However though, it's not weakness 1 necessarily, more just general weakness, because it stacks infinitely. There's an entire achievement on it actually, get weakness 50. Quite frankly, this ability doesn't require much explaining. The most complicated part about it is that if you get tails, the chance of you getting head is increased by 2.5%. So after 1 tails, it's 52.5, after 2 it's 55, 3, 57.5, you get the point. All this does is just, well, make it so you couldn't technically infinitely get tails. Otherwise, well, you'd have to have some pretty bad luck for that anyway. Quite frankly, this ability is very simple and doesn't require much explaining on my behalf, and it's quite easy to understand. One thing I will say here though, is effects are technically affected by the weakness. Now that sounds like it doesn't make sense. I'll try to explain it a bit better then. Basically what I'm trying to say is stuff like burning and poison will do more damage depending on your weakness levels. So if you're playing on a map like Yorick's with a poison lake, or as I'm playing here on, I forgot the map's name, with that small lava pool, it will do more damage, so just be very careful around those areas if you know you have weakness. Let's move on to his next ability, One Shot. This is Chance's most iconic ability in my opinion. It's the whole reason he's a sentinel and his only way to stun. When Chance shoots his gun, one of 3 separate things will happen. It will either shoot a total of 90 studs, with the stun varying from 1 to 4 seconds, depending on how far away the killer was when the hit shot hit. Or, nothing can happen. Like, nothing. You will get XP and malice for this though, so, However though, there is a third option. And that is the gun exploding. If Chance's gun explodes, a 6x6x6 hitbox will appear, in which if the killer is caught, a huge amount of knockback will be taken and a 5-second stun. So, you could get techie with this, but the odds of it happening are pretty low. And that's due to how Chance's one-shot and charges work. As I mentioned in Coin Flip, landing on heads will give you a total of 1 charge. Chance can have a maximum of 3. If Chance fires his gun with only 1 charge, there will be a 50% chance for it to fire, a 25% chance for it to explode, and a 25% chance for it to do nothing. With every charge, these will change, where the chance of it firing is increased by 20%. So at 2 charges it's 70, at 3 charges it's 90. But quite frankly, you're always going to be firing at 3 charges. I never really have I met someone who purposefully wants to be firing with lower. I do understand though that it may be fun. If you ever are really bored and want to have an exciting game, I would recommend One Charge Chance. It's very silly, and very funny in me. Chance's third ability is Reroll. This is where nothing happens. Well, something does happen. Chance's health will be randomized from, I think it's 55 to 130, making him either the weakest survivor or the most tanky. This is also affected by his charges. If he only has one charge, the health will be set at whatever he gets. So say he rolls and he gets a total of 50 health, not 50, that's not possible. Say he rerolls and gets 70 health. He will have 70 health. If Chance has 2 charges and rolls, an extra 5% HP will be added to whatever he is. So let's take that 70 again. After he rerolls, he will have a total of 74 HP. If Chance rerolls with 3 charges, he will be given a 10% increase. So let's take that 70 again. He would then have a total of 77 HP. It's not a very complicated ability to understand, and quite frankly, the charges are only going to be adding a little bit of HP. I personally prefer to reroll with 3, but we'll talk more about this ability later. His final ability is Hatfix. This ability can only, and I mean only, be used when Chance has a total of 3 charges. So, he will have to use this when it's maxed out, coming at the risk of him having to flip a ton, which could stack his weakness. Upon using Hatfix, all charges will be reset back to 0. However though, so will his weakness. If you were watching the screen, you would have noticed that my weakness was actually quite high until I used Hatfix. Then, when I flipped and landed on Tails, I only got weakness 1, compared to what I should have got, which was probably around weakness 10 or 11. However though, it doesn't only do this. Chance's Hatfix will also fix his gun. One thing I was stupid not to mention is if Chance's gun explodes, it just straight up breaks. So even if you have 3 charges, you cannot use the gun until you have officially used Hatfix, which will then fix the gun. Again, not too complicated, but we'll talk a little bit more about this in the strategy section. However though, there is one last thing I'd like to talk about, and that is Chance's passive. I kind of forgot that Chance has a passive because it's never really seen, and quite frankly, I just ignore it most of the time. The passive is, his health is random. At the start of the game, not with reroll. Wow. Chance's health will be randomized from I'm pretty sure it's 70 to 90 HP. That's probably wrong, but it's around that margin anyway. This is where reroll comes in, because if you get something like 70, you are officially weaker than an Elliot. However though, if it lands at 90, you're as strong as a Builder-Man. Wow, that sounds a little more dramatic. I feel like all the abilities have been covered here, and his passive isn't really that interesting and doesn't require much explaining. So, I think it's about time we move on to the strategy section of this video. As I said with his passive, Chance is going to start with a very, very low amount of ping. So, you're going to want to get that up pretty quickly. I recommend just staying as far away from the killer spawn as possible. Now, I'm not saying memorize every single killer spawn in the game, that would be a little bit ridiculous. But if you know the general direction of where the killer is, then just stay as far away from the spawn as possible. Don't go to highly dense areas where killers often tend to check. Otherwise, you'll be setting yourself up for a quick death. While coin flipping, I'd recommend re-rolling till you get above 100 HP. But that's just me personally. Understand if you want to be a bit more risky, you don't actually have to re-roll. But I'd still stay with 100. If you realise that you're getting super unlucky and you're just not getting over 100, I would honestly just stay 90 will be fine. Quite frankly, your stun has range, and that is a very important part of Chance. You are not going to be using your stun very close, too much at least. Otherwise, you'll probably just end up killing yourself. So, you just need to be careful with how much HP you have and managing the weakness, making sure the killer doesn't find you. So that's early game. Let's move on to coin flip. As I said, coin flip's weakness will infinitely stack. So you're going to be wanting you are going to want to hide a lot. If you know the killer's nearby, I'm not necessarily saying you have to stop flipping, but most players, including myself, if they hear a chance flipping their coin, they will go for you. So hiding inside a building is often the best chance. Oh yeah, I think I should say this because I see too many people do it. Stop flipping in chase! Wow, I didn't even need to increase the volume for CapCut to make that loud. If you were flipping mid-chase, you were just asking to die. However though, I will give a single exception to this scenario. In my opinion, if you are one-shot to everything in the killer's kit, you can start flipping. But at the end of the day, the one-shot cooldown is the longest stun in the game at 42 seconds. So, yeah, if you've already used it, you're going to be in trouble. So, overall with coin flip, don't flip in front of the killer. I know it sounds simple, but seriously, it's going to save your life. Next, we'll move on to one shot. You're often going to be wanting to fire with 3 shots, always. There's no real reason to be firing with 2, and unless you're trying to get techie with having a single charge and hoping it explodes, then yeah, there's just no point real with you. You want to be firing from a decent amount of distance, because killers often don't tend to have chances on their radar. I wouldn't recommend firing in front of them, especially against someone, say, like a John Doe or a Slasher, where they can parry you, because it's a long wind up and a long wind down. Oh yeah, I probably should have said this. Chance's gun has a lot of end lag. I'm pretty sure it's the most in the game, but I may be wrong. In that state, Chance will not be able to sprint, so yeah, you need to be careful with the gun. I'd say often fire from far enough away to get roughly a 2 to 3 second stun, as that's going to be helping your team the most. Even a 1 second stun will technically help them, but not as much as if you were just that tiny bit closer. Not saying you have to be in the killer's face though, that's a high risk. There is one particular tech with Chance that I think I should talk about. If you click the button to fire one shot, and then hit shift lock to turn around really quickly, you could catch the killer off guard. However though, they will still see your arm moving, so just be warned, you're not 100% safe while using this tech. Quite frankly, with one shot, my only real tips for it are just being careful. If you know the killer is good, they could just try and dodge it. It is a very easy stun to dodge after all. So you are playing with quite a bit of risk in just simply using the ability. However though, there is one exception to this. LMS. If you're in last man standing, you really want to get that high amount of stun time. A 4-second stun can be the difference between life and death in a last man standing. The final thing I want to talk about is Hatfix. Now, as I was saying earlier, you shouldn't be flipping in chase. However though, if the killer catches you with your weakness and it's at the full 15 seconds, sometimes it's actually better to keep flipping. If you just run from the killer and continuously flip, you might just, and I mean just, be able to pull off the Hatfix before the killer is able to get you. This is your only saving grace. If you're unable to do this, then yeah, you're probably dead. Look, you really shouldn't be really caught lacking with your weakness, because if you are, then well, you're dead pretty much. But Hatfix can be your saving grace. I wouldn't really ever recommend using it outside of that situation or to fix your gun. Other than that, there's not really any reason to Hatfix. You might as well just let the 15 seconds go off be your weakness. But yeah, overall pretty simple ability. As I said at the start of this video, Chance is not a very complicated character, and quite frankly, there isn't much to him. You don't really need to be worried while playing him. Sure, there's always that element of risk with his gambling, but at the end of the day, it's just about playing the game a bit more carefully than you would with most survivors. Chance's worst situation will probably be last man standing, because he's only going to be able to get one stun off. Otherwise, you'll be forced to flip during chase, which yeah, as I said, will get you killed. Overall, I think this is all you really need to understand how to play Chance. Other than, of course, the basic skills of Forsaken, stamina management, all that stuff. But I think that concludes this video. If you've made it this far, then I would really appreciate a subscribe. I'm planning to try and do more of these guides, and maybe just a bit more interesting content in general. I'm trying to hit 100 subs before the end of summer, and I would really appreciate it if you managed it. But without further ado, have a great day. See you in the next one.